The journey from food to energy is by no means an easy one, as it requires navigating through an infamous process known as cellular respiration. Now, if you haven't already clicked out of this video at the mere mention of that term, congratulations. You must either not know what cellular respiration is, or you've never taken a biology class that required you to learn about it in detail. Most biology students despise cellular respiration, and understandably so. It's a complex process involving countless biochemical reactions taking place in multiple stages. A lot of biology students are forced to memorize some, if not all, of these stages for their tests, and that's enough to turn anyone away from the field of biology forever. And that's a shame, because most students who are forced to memorize the Krebs cycle get distracted by all the crazy sounding names they have to learn, and don't get a chance to comprehend what's actually going on. Because of this, I want to attempt to explain to you, my valued viewer, how our food gets converted into energy, but without getting caught up in a bunch of biological jargon. But before we dive into cellular respiration, we need to talk about food. It's where we get our energy from. But food doesn't give us pure energy. It gives us the fuel we need to produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. It's our body's energy currency. And the most common fuel provided by food comes in the form of sugar, usually glucose. And our energy comes from our metabolism, which is a collective term for all of the controlled biochemical reactions that take place in your cells, not just the ones associated with food. One of these controlled biochemical reactions is called cellular respiration, and it's how your food gets converted into energy. The end result of cellular respiration is to capture as much energy as possible from each individual glucose molecule. But in order for the glucose molecule to be converted into energy, it first needs to be broken down into smaller pieces. That way, it's easier for your cells to process. This is accomplished through the first stage of cellular respiration, called glycolysis. But don't freak out. Glyco just means sugar, and lysis means to split, so glycolysis literally means sugar splitting. The ultimate goal of glycolysis is to break down one big sugar molecule into two smaller sugar molecules. That's literally it. You have one big sugar molecule, glucose, and you want to split it into two smaller sugar molecules called pyruvate. This is accomplished in 10 steps, which I won't get into detail here, but it is important to remember that 4 ATP and 2 of another molecule called NADH are generated as a byproduct of glycolysis. Some key points of glycolysis to remember are: 1. It is anaerobic, meaning this process doesn't require oxygen. 2. It takes place in the cytosol, a component of the cytoplasm. And 3. There are 2 main phases of glycolysis, the energy investment phase and the energy payoff phase. In the energy investment phase, your body uses 2 pre-existing ATP molecules to bind to and modify the structure of the glucose molecule to be broken down. The resulting modified glucose, called glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, or G3P, is easier to break down, so it is worth the investment. But remember, at this point we are 2 ATP molecules in the whole. Another important side note is that the energy investment phase generates another molecule alongside G3P, called DHAP, which will later be converted to G3P to in turn be broken down into more pyruvate. Moving on to the second main phase, the energy payoff phase is where the modified glucose molecule, G3P, gets converted into pyruvate, and we finally start to see a return on our investment. For each G3P that is converted to pyruvate, 2 ATP and 1 NADH are created as a byproduct. The DHAP molecule from earlier is then converted to G3P, and the process repeats, and we are left with 4 ATP, 2 NADH, and 2 pyruvate. But remember, we've already lost 2 ATP molecules in the process, so the net gain from glycolysis is 2 ATP, 2 NADH, and 2 pyruvate. Now, remember, ATP is our energy currency, and it is produced as a byproduct here because breaking down a large molecule into smaller molecules releases energy. So what about NADH? Well, NADH is an electron carrier, a molecule capable of accepting an electron and transporting it to another molecule. It's basically just an energy placeholder for now, although it will later be used to transfer electrons between molecules in the final stage. That's also important to remember because throughout the next few stages, we will be receiving a lot of these electron carriers as reaction products. Our goal in the reactions leading up to the final stage of cellular respiration is to generate as many of these electron carriers as possible so that we can use them to produce ATP in the final stage. So far, we've used 2 ATP molecules to break down our original glucose into 2 smaller molecules, which were then converted to pyruvate through a series of energy-releasing reactions. After paying back our initial investment of 2 ATP, we are left with 2 ATP, 2 NADH, and 2 pyruvate. But what do we do with these now that we have them? Well, at this point, we're almost ready to head into the Krebs cycle, but seeing as this video is already starting to get long, I decided to cover the rest of this topic in a separate video. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel. It really helps me in continuing to make these videos. Thanks. Now go study glycolysis and quit watching YouTube videos. Bye-bye.